Yeah, these new vehicles are computers on wheels. It's absolutely amazing what is happening. I just went out onto the highway across the 14th Street Bridge, 395, in a Tesla, vehicle, and I looked right, I looked left, and it was like, look, Ma, no hands. Okay, so I'm just driving along down the highway at 11:30 this morning in one of these demonstration vehicles, and it was just absolutely amazing, very impressive. Clearly, we're still at the dawn of the era, but the promise is there, and we can see it, and I'm very glad I took the demonstration this morning. Back in 2013, and again last year, I asked 20 automakers what they are doing to protect our computers on wheels, and what I found is that they're not doing enough. After reviewing the original responses from the automakers, I released a report, and the report is entitled Tracking and Hacking Security and Privacy Gaps Put American Drivers at Risk. And here's what we learned from the study, that thieves no longer need a crowbar to break into a car, they just need an iPhone. Today's connected cars are also collecting tremendous amounts of personal driving information. Cars know where you are, where you've been, how fast or slow you drive, and even the mileage since your last oil change. And some of that is good. Some of it is important to have gathered. But if all the vehicles out there were fully autonomous, and we were all relying upon computers and not a human driver from the start to get to where you are, to get to where you want to go, those vulnerabilities will become more pronounced in our society. So I just have a couple of questions for the panel. Number one, we need enforceable rules of the road to protect driver privacy and security. And I introduced with Senator Blumenthal the Security and Privacy in Your Car Act, or the SPY Car Act, that directs the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Federal Trade Commission to establish federal standards to secure our cars and protect our drivers' privacy. So for each of the panelists, if you would, I would like you to answer this question on mandatory cybersecurity standards, including hacking protection. That means all access points in the car should be equipped with reasonable measures to protect against hacking attacks. Data security measures. That means that all collected information should be secured to prevent unwanted access. And hacking mitigation, so that vehicles are equipped with technology that can detect and report and stop hacking attempts in real time. So, Dr. Cummings, what do you think? Do we need rules of the road that are formally
I'm in general agreement with all of those issues, but I will tell you, as a university professor on the cutting edge of this technology, the concerns that I have and that I testified 2 years ago in front of this same committee is that it's happening so quickly that the government institutions cannot keep pace. The government cannot hire the same people that Chris is hiring at Google X. He's got
this would just be to say to the companies, build in the hacking protections.
I agree, but I also think that you need a regulatory framework that can ensure this is happening.
And that's what I'm asking. Should we say to NHTSA and to the...
I say yes, but I'm saying
okay.
I don't think NHTSA, at least today, has the people on the staff that they need to do that.
Right. And again, that's the problem with the Securities Exchange Commission. They had a whole bunch of lawyers and no economists to deal with the meltdown that occurred because it had been computerized. Okay, they moved to a different trading model. So obviously the agencies have to get, the technical expertise they need. But it would be important, though, to have the rules if they had the personnel to do it.
I agree, but I think
Okay,
that's
good.
a real challenge.
I understand. We have to meet the challenges of the future. Mr. Okpaku?
Thank you for the question, Senator Markey. And we at Lyft are, not only are we fully committed to ensuring that we prevent any instances of cyber hacking, or any violations of our user privacy, but yes, we are in support of well thought out principles that would codify our previously existing attempts to ensure that. I think it's important, though, and I know this has been discussed before, that these principles be very well thought out, that there be a consistency of what these principles look like. We're dealing with a technology that is going to be deployed across the country, and in order to do so, we need to make sure that whatever principles are put in place to ensure the privacy and safety of our users, that it's consistent across the country.
I think the chairman's going to catch up to me. Yes or no? Do we need mandatory standards or not? Mr. DeVos?
I think it's, we really haven't determined whether we think we need mandatory standards or not, but what we have determined is that it does help to standardize in the testing, standardize in the approaching. And so
Mr.
the
Ableson?
question for us is how do we get there?
Mr. Ableson?
We support the Auto ISAC as a way to trade information across the OEM. I think OEMs and suppliers, I think the point of regulation trying to stay ahead of this very fast-changing area, we think a more flexible approach is preferable.
Okay, Dr. Urmson?
Google is attacked on a regular basis. We have hundreds of people dedicated to cybersecurity, and what we've learned through that is that it's a very dynamic space, and that it's important to be able to adapt the principles of which you defend over time.
Okay, and I understand what you're saying, but witnesses sat here 30 years ago and said the same thing about airbags and seatbelts, and how they should just leave it to the individual companies. It was hard to mandate a specific airbag, and it would be very expensive. So I understand the consistency over the decades, but at the same time, people expect airbags to protect their children, and they're going to expect certain standards that are going to be mandated across the board that are going to protect people. I was hit by a car when I was 5, running across the street. And I was chasing 2 9-year-olds. I was only 5, and I could see how difficult it was for the driver in retrospect to know I was going to do it. And as we're moving forward, we just want to make sure that we don't have unnecessary accidents, you know, and clearly hackers are going to have the ability to be able to break into these vehicles. There's going to be a whole bunch of very smart young people who are going to start playing games with this technology going forward. And so the kinds of protections you build in can be voluntary, but if 10 companies do it and 10 don't, then those 10 are going to be identified by the hackers as the ones they're going to be playing games with out on the highways. And I just think we need minimal standards that every company is going to meet. And I just think the sooner we start the discussion and accept that as a responsibility, the better off we'll be. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So can we go down on the privacy issue as well? We dealt with the question of safety, but what about privacy? Do you think there should be a mandatory minimum for privacy protection, which is put on the books so that owners have to be made explicitly aware of collection, transmission, retention, and use of driving data, providing owners the right to say no to data collection and without losing access to key navigation or other features, and ensuring that personal driving information not be used for advertising or marketing purposes without the owner clearly opting in? Dr. Cummings?
Yes, Senator Markey. I mean, I think these are issues that we're facing across a number of industries and a number of technologies. And the fact of the matter is that these cars are going to be one big data gathering machine, visual images, telemetry data, all of your personal data. And so I see it in a way that, you know, once this happens, and right now the cars really do need to talk to each other, and they need to talk back to the manufacturers to let them know what's going on. So for the near term, they need to talk, but they are going to be gathering a lot of data, and it's not clear who is going to be doing what with that data. And I personally would feel better to know that there was some set of standards in place that were protecting my personal data, or at least, like you said, allowed me to know what's happening
So
with
you
it.
think there should be rules that the information can't be used for marketing purposes?
Absolutely.
Being gathered about you driving.
Absolutely.
How you're selling that information to other people. Do you agree with that, Mr. Okpaku?
Senator Markey, thank you for the question. And similar to what Mr. Ableson said, Lyft has very strict policies in place where personal data cannot be used for any other purpose without strict opt-in by its
And
users.
should they be mandatory?
Well, the way I would address that, sir, is that there should definitely be standards. How the standards are developed is really the question. And if I can draw this back to the ride-sharing industry, which is where my area of experience is, what we've examined there is that when we first launched, we put upon ourselves a lot of high standards with respect to safety, with respect to privacy, with respect to insurance. As an example, we developed a whole new type of insurance that provided $1 million of coverage for all of our passengers. This had not been required by any
Can I-
law.
Let's just take me as a passenger and another 100 people who live in the Boston area, and somebody just wants access to the names of all the people and where they went using your service. Do you think there should be a privacy protection for that you're bound by, that you can't sell that information even though people would want to know who was coming into that area? Don't you think that should be an absolute prohibition on your selling the information as to where people are going inside of your cabs?
There should definitely be privacy protections. I guess the only point I'm trying to raise is that there are very unique situations that can't always be foreseen in the development of new technology that we need to be mindful of in developing standards for this type of thing, and that's what we've
But
notified.
assuming you're already doing the right thing, which is what you're saying, then why would you have a problem with kind of just working, to create a standard then that could be used across the industry?
Well, that was, if you will, sir, that was the point I was going to make, was that in Lyft developing these policies internally, we've now seen the policies that Lyft and other ride-sharing companies have enacted of their own volition become kind of the standard for the industry. But I think that was important to make sure that the involvement of the industry to ensure what the appropriate standards were.
Yeah, and again, my time is going to run out. So you've already heard the options here. Mr. DeVos, yes or no mandatory?
We haven't really taken a position on mandatory or not, but what I would say is we'd like to be part of that discussion
Okay, great.
to formulate how do you approach it.
You should first just decide yes or no, though. That would be helpful. And Mr. Ableson?
We'll continue to work with the regulatory agencies on what we think is required.
So you don't have a yes or no on it, then, in terms of a mandatory minimal privacy standard? No,
I
okay.
believe we fulfill.
I know you do, but all the bad companies out there that aren't as good as your company, that's what I'm saying. We don't pass murder statutes for our mothers. They're not going to murder anybody, okay? We do it for the people who we think might murder people, so you need a kind of a minimal standard. So, it's assuming your company never does anything wrong, you still need a statute for people who might do things wrong, say. So you don't think we need that statute, or?
Senator, we'll continue to work.
Okay,
with
good.
the
I
proper
appreciate
bodies on
that.
developing those
Dr.
standards.
Urmson?
Google has a variety of policies that we use around privacy. It's foundational to our business, and we're very public and
And
transparent.
what do you think about making that foundation a standard, though? That would have to be met statute?
I would have to submit an answer to the record on that. I'm not in a position to comment on that for Google.
Again, I think ultimately yes is the right answer. So there's a minimal standard, and hopefully we'll reach that day.